Ready? Well, good morning. Welcome to the May 30, 2024 Community Corrections Partnership meeting. Let's open the meeting, and clerk, please call the roll to establish a quorum.
Member Benson,
Present.
Sullivan,
Present.
Geller,
Present.
Brookins, Lutz,
Present.
White,
Present.
Warren,
Present.
Cathari,
Present.
Monk,
Present.
Jones,
Present.
Triplett,
Present.
Walker,
Here.
and Chair Yarber.
Here.
And you have a quorum.
Great. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. 1 second. Sure. Take your time. I did. All right. Just looking around, I don't think we have anyone that's here for the first time, I think. Sorry, excuse me. Matt Warren and Dan Monk. Would you both please introduce yourselves and welcome to the CCP?
Yeah, thank you. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Correct.
Dan
Yeah.
Monk with the Sacramento Police Department. Sorry, Chief Lester's out of town, so she's not able to be here today.
Excellent.
And Matt Warren, I recently took over for Dan Donnelly as Chief Deputy of Correctional Services with the Sheriff's Office.
Excellent. Thank you both. I see each of you in different settings, so you're familiar to me. So perhaps not to the rest of the group, certainly not to the volume of people watching us, I think, on Metro Cable, as I understand it. So other than that, no introductory comments from me, but we'll ask if there are any introductory comments, anything as it relates to information worthy of sharing before we jump into our agenda from the other members. All right. Seeing none, let's move on to our agenda. Clerk, can you please read item 1 into the record for us?
Recording in progress.
Let me first read the opening statement.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
This meeting of the Sacramento County Community Corrections Partnership is being cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse. This meeting is closed captioned and live streamed at metro14live.saccounty.gov. Today's meeting will replay on Sunday, February 4th at 2 p.m. on Channel 14. This meeting can also be viewed at youtube.com/metrocable14. The partnership fosters public engagement during the meeting and encourages public participation, civility, and use of courteous language. To make a comment in person, please fill out a speaker request form and hand it to clerk staff. The chairperson will open public comments for each agenda item or call for off-agenda matters. When the chairperson calls your name, go to the podium and make your comment. You may send written comments by email to boardclerk@saccounty.gov. Your comment will be routed to the members and filed in the record. Thank you in advance for your courtesy and understanding of the meeting procedures.
Excellent. Thank you. I was hoping to make up time. All right. Now for item 1, clerk.
Item 1 is Community Corrections Partnership Advisory Board update.
Excellent. And I believe staff person Laura Foster is going to walk us through this and all of our other items as well. So Laura, I'll turn to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Brief update on the advisory board. You'll hear a little bit more about some of their activities later in our agenda today, but I did just want to announce that we have a new member, Tiana Hammock, representing social services, and we have a new vice chair in Joe Crest from the Public Defender's Office. The CCPAB has met at least once, possibly twice, since the last meeting of this group. They have 2 ad hoc committees, one that's looking into the issue of racial disparities and another that is dedicated to outreach focusing on crime survivors. Those ad hoc committees have been a little bit on pause because we've been working on our community safety project, which you'll hear about later today, and I expect to be able to report back to you on those other committees at our next meeting here. That's all I have for you on that item.
Great. Any comments, discussion, questions? Any public comment regarding the
We
item?
have no public
Assume
comments.
None. Excellent. We'll open and close that. If there are no other comments, let's please move to the second item on our agenda.
Item 2 is discussion of and possible action to change live streaming practices for Community Corrections Partnership meetings.
Great. Back to you, Laura.
So as our wonderful clerk announced earlier in her opening statements that currently our meetings are live streamed through Metro Cable. They do a great job of that. You can access it multiple times a week and on YouTube as mentioned. However, we've been currently getting that for free. There is a possibility that that could change in the future, and there is more information in your packet, which I understand you all got very late yesterday, so I understand if you haven't had time to look it all over. But essentially, there are some meetings that they support already that do pay a fee and others that currently do not pay a fee, and they're looking at ways to sort that all out moving forward, and it will be soon heard by the Board of Supervisors at a couple of their meetings. We recognize that perhaps we have a little bit of lower viewership for some of these meetings, and that we would not want to necessarily incur additional fees to support that service. The Community Corrections Partnership Advisory Board currently uses Zoom Webinar to live stream their meetings. We could easily convert this meeting to using Zoom Webinar, and we would lose no functionality to the county, no functionality to the viewers. You would lose the live streaming on your Metro Cable TV if you're watching your public access channels. But I think that would be the main difference if we were to switch to Zoom. So the suggestion today is that if the board is willing, that we explore and make sure that we test the Zoom webinar feature with these meetings, and that if and when there is a fee that comes around for the Metro Cable streaming service, that we would switch over to Zoom webinar instead. The estimated cost is several $100s a meeting if we were to continue streaming with Metro Cable, if those fees went through in the 25-26 year. That's all I have.
Thank you. So, Lord, if I understand correctly, the ask is that we begin testing first?
Well, the ask is essentially that you go ahead and green light us moving forward with switching to Zoom if and when there is a fee increase. If there's no fee increase, then I see no reason why we should upset the apple cart and just continue with what we're doing. But I would, Metro Cable has requested some responses by, I think, June 3rd or June 4th was their deadline. And I'd like to be able to give them an informed picture of what could happen with this board if the fee increase goes through, and that my thought is that we would no longer request those services moving forward, which could affect how their other fees go for their other meetings or other elements of their work. So I am looking for a vote today that would authorize us to move to Zoom if and when there is a fee increase, so we can provide that information to Metro Cable. And if there's other comments that you'd like to share with Metro Cable about their proposed fees and some of the different options that they have, I would welcome that as well.
Great. Thank you for that additional information. Let me open it up, see if there's any discussion or any comments relative to the request. Sure. Member Warren.
I do just have one question. Does Zoom have closed captioning?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Zoom has live captioning. It's imperfect, but all of the services are, and it does have the ability to do that if a user turns on the captioning feature.
Excellent. And I assume someone will help guide and run all of the interface with Zoom so that I do not have to do that as chair,
Yes.
purely for selfish reasons, I'm asking.
Yes, I would work with the clerk's office to make that a seamless switch over, and we do already use that for our advisory board meetings and have had no issues with our live streaming practices.
That is great to hear. Thank you. Very comforting. Other questions, comments, or concerns? All right. See none. Any public comment?
We have no public comment.
No public comment. Great. So let's open and close that. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendation from staff.
Motion. I move to accept
Great.
Laura's recommendation.
We have a first and a second. How do you want to handle, clerk?
Okay, we're going to do it on the screens.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, and the motion carries with those members present.
Great. All right. Moving on to our next item. Clerk, please read item 3 into the record.
Item 3 is discussion of Proposition 47, Local Advisory Committee formation and possible action to approve letter of agreement for Prop 47 Cohort 4 grant application.
Great. And Laura, I believe you're prepared to talk us through this item as well.
Thank you. So last year in our AB 109 plan, as a result of some of the work that the advisory board had done and also some input from some other local justice involved bodies, including the Community Review Commission and a project that was done by On Track Resources about the Community Health and Justice Project. Essentially, one of the suggestions that came in over and over again was that we need some kind of 24/7 receiving center for individuals who are exiting the jail so that they can have their immediate needs met and be connected with some service linkages to mental health services and substance use services, and ideally housing as well. So with all of those documents and all of those great groups that had come together and made very similar suggestions, that ended up being part of our AB 109 plan, where we prioritized jail discharge services, including those upon release, including transportation, and a few other services as identified. One of the ways we're going to try to hopefully fund this project is an opportunity through the Proposition 47 grant. The Prop 47 grant is designed to help programs that will reduce recidivism, that will connect individuals with mental health and substance use services, among other things. So there's a perfect lineup between what that grant is looking for and what we are seeking to do here as well. One of the criteria for this grant, the grant can be up to $8 million, and it's for a total of 3 years. The county had already been exploring, how could we pilot some of these services and looking at, is a 24/7 receiving center something that would be utilized? Would it be something that we can continue to support? And this would allow us to really test those waters and connect people with great services for a couple of years, if we're awarded the grant. One of the conditions of the grant is that we have to have a Proposition 47 local advisory committee, and that committee needs to reflect the different partners who are involved and related to that project, which would be a mixture of justice system, social service system, and community partners. It also needs to advise health services, who is going to be the designated contact for this grant. They're going to be the leading department on how to identify and prioritize the most pressing needs to be addressed, how to identify the strategies, programs, and services to be undertaken to address those needs, the development of the project itself, and ongoing implementation of the project. It also needs to provide and create an outlet for community input and public input into this process. Well, when we were looking at what we would need to support that local advisory committee, and we were looking at the composition of this board, we saw substantial overlap, that all of the people are already here, and that this project already came out of work that was authorized by this board. With one small tweak, which would be the addition of 2 community members from the CCPAB, particularly those with lived experience with the justice system who reflect the great diversity of our community, we would then ask to create the local agency, the local advisory committee for Prop 47. And so if this is something that the board would support today, at our next CCP meeting, we would essentially have, like when the Board of Supervisors changes hats and they're all of a sudden a different committee, they're, housing or some other body, we would do that here. And we would start our meeting as the local advisory committee. We would discuss the project and anything going on, allow you to provide input and the community to provide that input as well. And then we would switch hats, switch gears, and go back to our regular CCP meetings as usual. So that is the proposal on the table. Our 2 CCPAB community members would only stay for that first part of the meeting, and of course they could stay as members of the public afterward, but we would just go back to our regular business. We have tended not to use the full hour and a half that's designated for these meetings, and so we thought there's capacity there, and again, the representation is already here. So what we are looking for today is we need to assign a letter of agreement, and if the board approves, then I would circulate this electronic signatures for all of the members here and the 2 CCPAB members, and you would become the local advisory committee for Prop 47. If we are not successful in securing the grant, this committee goes away, never existed, never happened. But if we are successful in getting the grant, you would be advisors to that project to make sure it's meeting the intent of why you wanted this idea to happen in the first place of this receiving center, and provide guidance as the project moves forward. That's all I have.
Other comments, questions? Sure, Member Jones.
So I would just add that, thank you, Laura, for that. So we don't have a 24/7 receiving center for those, out of custody, which is something many of us have been in numerous meetings about. This grant would really help with that. And my understanding is unless we form this body or use this body to do the work, we will not receive the grant at all. And I just think that one less meeting would be nice, both for the community members that want to have input in this, but also for the members here that would have to be part of that committee anyway. So I do like the recommendation.
Appreciate that. Other comments? Member Lutz.
Yeah, and I'll echo to when we were looking at this grant, since I appreciate Laura and this team as we've been putting this grant together in health services, and I think this body does represent the best mix of partners we would want to have at the table for this program. There might be other pathways to create a different committee, but again, it's a much lengthier, protracted process, and I think this seems like the ideal solution to really help as we implement and help us inform our approach with this opportunity if we're awarded.
Great. Thank you for that. And just a quick question, and I'll come back to the queue. Laura, would you for a moment just speak to, I think what I may hear referenced, I think in our conversation, why the CCP advisory board would not be appropriate in this instance.
Thank you. There are several pieces, or there are representation on this board that are not present on our advisory board. The advisory board only reflects the executive committee, so it wouldn't have our victim witness representative, it wouldn't have our school board representatives, it wouldn't have the training and wouldn't have CETA on it as well. There are several components that would not be here. One piece in particular is housing, and with Siobhan being the overseer of the housing department through the social services agency, that would be represented here, but not on our advisory board.
Appreciate that. As I was, I think, understanding the role of the local advisory committee, it sounded a lot like what our CCP is doing in the way of identification of needs, prioritization, making recommendations, implementation. I was like, oh, that would be a lot closer perhaps to the issue. But with what you just described, I think it makes a lot of sense. Member Triplett.
Who would be the administrator of the grant, and what do you foresee the different member agencies here having to do as far as additional work to support the grant?
Thank you. Health Services is the department that will be responsible for the grant and the administrator of the grant. So that would be Tim Lutz's shop. In terms of member expectations, show up, read any materials that are provided. There would be no specific requirements for any of the representatives here, just to lean on your existing expertise and your knowledge to provide guidance as the project and its elements are presented to you at our meetings.
And then follow up to that, how would the community members be vetted or chosen?
So the community members were already chosen. They are on our CCPAB, and they were chosen by this board. There was a public application process every 2 years, and then this board selects who those members were. And the reason we're not including all 4 of the CCPAB community members is, quite frankly, logistical. When the members for the CCPAB signed up for that, it's a once-a-month meeting. This is an additional meeting at a different time, and we recognize that that may not work with all of their schedules, and so we wanted to give them the option to hopefully have 2 of those members be willing to serve here.
And just a follow-up perhaps to that, a finer point maybe, of the 4, how will the 2 be chosen?
Yes. So the ideal members, and we still have to approach them. This body came first, and then we would go to them. I have heard informally from our members that we would have at least 2, but we would prioritize those with lived experience with the justice system.
Thank you. And back back to my cue. Member Lutz.
Yeah, I just wanted to also follow up on the question on what we would be asking. For us, this group is all of the partners at the table here are really helping us inform process. So it would really be the ask for many of you is when we bring this back, highlight progress of the grant, linkage opportunities, identifying gaps. That would be the extent of what we'd be asking partner agencies here, not necessarily taking on the work the grant would pay for us bringing in a community-based organization to be doing a lot of that lifting, the heavy lift.
Member Warren.
I was just curious, how long is, if you know, how long has this grant existed, and what's the likelihood of its being continued beyond that 3-year time period?
My understanding, and I am not fully informed on this one, so my understanding is that they would not continue beyond that 3 years. And at that time, we would need to explore other options if we wanted to continue using this service. Or that's really a big part of why we want to do this, is to see, is that need justified? We hear informally through many, many groups that is something that is needed, but we lack some of the data on that, and this would help us to collect that data and be able to make informed decisions 3 years from now.
Other questions? Comments? Seeing none, where am I? Apologies. Are there any public comments regarding the item?
We have no public comments.
Great, thank you. I will now entertain a motion to support the recommendation.
I would move to approve.
We have a first and a second. Please vote on your screen.
The motion carries with those members present.
Great, thank you. I think a very good opportunity for us. Obviously, the need's been demonstrated, and so welcome the challenge. And particularly as we, are I think anticipating some downturns in our economy, the grant might be able to assist us in this instance, provided we're successful. Let me say that. All right, moving on to item 4. Clerk, would you please read item 4 into the record for us?
Item 4 is discussion of preliminary findings of community safety survey and possible action to direct the Community Correction Partnership Advisory Board on next steps.
All right, back to our staff. Laura?
Sorry, I hate to see a typo in a title there, Community Corrections Partnership. It's not the only one in this packet, I'm sure. So as all of you know, one of our goals for the AB 109 plan is to improve and maintain community safety. We have to have outcome measures for each of our goals when we report annually to the BSCC. Up till now, we have only been using crime rates as our indicator of whether we're succeeding in improving and maintaining community safety. Community safety has become a very hot button word, as we've discussed here in this forum before, and that perhaps we don't have a definition. And so what the CCPAB sought out to do was to get some input from the community and to see, hey, is there any kind of consensus that we can arrive at? Is there something that we need to know when the community hears the word community safety, and how perhaps that differs from what we're intending when we say we want to improve and maintain community safety? And so the more formal presentation of this information will be presented at the CCPAB meeting in a couple of weeks. We were still collecting surveys as of yesterday, so I have some preliminary information for you. What we did was we put out a survey, but also we went to the Disability Advisory Commission, the Community Wellness Response Team Advisory Committee, the Mental Health Board, the Public Safety and Justice Agency Advisory Committee, and the Community Review Commission. There were dreams to do many, many others of these, but that's how much we got to in this time frame. And we also, in addition to that, at each of those meetings, we went and we asked them 4 questions, which is, how do you define community safety? What is one thing that makes you feel safe in your community? What's one thing that makes you feel unsafe in your community? And if you could make your community a safer place, what's one thing that you would do to do that? And so in addition to the feedback we got during the focus groups at those different representative bodies, which are all publicly noticed as well, except for the Public Safety and Justice Agency Advisory Committee. But in addition to that, we also put the survey out and asked individual members to share with anyone they knew if they would be willing to fill out that same survey. And so we had 37 responses to that survey beyond the focus groups themselves. The survey respondents of those 37, we had 25 zip codes represented across all 5 districts of the county. We had 43% of individuals who self-identified as having lived experience with the justice system. We did not put any parameters on how to define that. That was if an individual just said, yes, I have lived experience. We had diverse ethnicities represented. We had 41% people who were white, 27% black, 8% Hispanic, 16% Asian, 5% multiracial, and 1 who did not respond. We had all ages represented. We had some who were under 18, some that were over 65, some that were 18 to 24, but we had the bulk of respondents were between 25 and 44 and 45 and 64. The survey respondents were 60% women, 38% men, and 2% that identified as a different gender identity. In the personal history section of the demographics on that survey, 46% of respondents identified as having a history with disability or a physical health condition, 36% identified as crime survivors, 32% had a history of financial instability or poverty, 27% identified as having lived with a mental health condition, 27% had a history of significant trauma, 18% had a history of homelessness or housing instability, and then we had additional respondents who identified as having a gang affiliation, juvenile dependency or experience with foster care, experience with the juvenile justice system, history of military service, and substance use history. So even though we only had 37 responses, we really had quite a wide variety of those who did respond. Some of the common themes that emerged, and these were free-flowing dialogue boxes, so my very quick qualitative analysis here is just looking to identify themes. What did we hear over and over again? In asking what made them feel safe, some of the themes that came up were knowing your neighbors, being able to count on others and having solid relationships, everyone having their needs met, accessibility, especially lighting, living free from harm or violence, the presence of law enforcement, especially in non-emergency contexts. Common themes in what made me feel unsafe: crime, lack of accountability, people not following rules, presence of law enforcement, militarization of police, uncleanliness, homelessness, the criminalization of homelessness, lack of resources, chaos. What things would make your community safer? More law enforcement, less law enforcement, more shelters, permanent housing, neighbors to have their basic needs met, more accountability, better lighting, more neighborhood safety meetings, and investments in parks, libraries, healthcare, etc. So one thing that you may have noticed is that pretty much for every time we heard that law enforcement makes someone feel safe, we heard that law enforcement identified as something that doesn't make people feel safe. And that there is a clear tie when people say the word safety that people think of law enforcement. They think of other things as well, but law enforcement has come to mind over and over and over again. And so there's 2 ways that we can move forward. We've got a lot of great feedback. Oh, I didn't give you the definitions of the community safety because they are wide-ranging. And quite frankly, not a lot of great theming that we could come up with for that. But I will do a little bit of a deeper dive on that at the CCPAB meeting. And in terms of next steps, there's 2 processes. One, we got great feedback on how we could make the survey better. We got feedback at every turn about how to improve the survey itself and make it a little more specific. So we could spend more time looking into the concept of community safety, refine the survey itself, and spend 6 months broadcasting to a much larger audience, getting it out there to all the supervisors and their email blasts, and really just making an effort to go to every community meeting. We could do that. And I think that is something worth talking about and moving forward. I'm not sure for this body that makes sense. When I look at what this body's purpose of doing this was to get a definition so that we can identify outcome measures. And I think perhaps the better solution is to not use the word community safety and to come up with an alternate goal that meets the intent of what this body is expecting. That we understand that safety is going to be important, but unless we're willing to put a definition behind it and then apply specific measures, that perhaps we could just use other words. And really, my suggestion would be that we move just this concept of maintain and improve community safety. It's important. Everyone would agree it's important, but it is broad, and it is not as perhaps specific to this plan as it could be. So my hope is that if we come back at a future meeting, that we can look carefully at what our prioritized programs are, what the things that our plan supports, and say, hey, what are those things seeking to accomplish, and how can we best measure those? So my recommendation today is that if the board is willing to provide any feedback, we would welcome it. But my suggestion would be that we move away from continuing with the community safety conversation and instead work at refining our goals themselves to be something that's a little more specific, a little more actionable, and a lot clearer to the community as well. So I'm looking for initial feedback today.
Open it up to our members. Member Lutz, are you still in the queue, or is this leftover?
Leftover, yeah.
Understood. Thank you. I had a question. Laura, you said 37 respondents?
37,
And
plus,
again,
plus the focus groups, which we had, I think, 25 people between all those different, or maybe more, between all those different groups. And not everyone spoke up.
And roughly how many were dispersed? I don't know if you
Yes, we had across geographically. So we had 25 zip codes across all of the 5 districts. So there was not a ton of representation in each area. I think the most we had for any one particular zip code was 3 people. Otherwise, it was quite widespread. But fully recognize 37 is not enough to make any major research level conclusions here.
Got it.
But it is also reflective of the input we heard from the advisory boards themselves.
Got it. Member Triplett.
I think you said, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that all the respondents to the survey had lived experience.
Approximately half, 43% identified as having lived experience, an unspecified lived experience.
Member Warren.
I would just, encourage, I think you're on the right track. Anytime you have such a disparate group of people, to try and get consensus on an abstract theme as to what safety really looks like is going to be very hard to gauge. So I would just encourage the advisory committee, if this is something they're going to pursue, to focus on measurable and demonstrable metrics.
Thank you.
Other questions? And Laura, were there other suggestions or ideas I think that maybe came out of this?
Sure, yeah.
Back
I
and forth
did
there,
want to
if
share
you're ready
something.
to share yet or not,
I wanted
but
to share something I had forgotten to mention
piques
earlier.
my curiosity, obviously.
So in addition to the work that we did here, this conversation is not happening only in Sacramento County. This is happening in many other communities throughout the country. Specifically, the Safety and Justice Challenge did a project with a university, and they looked at Missoula County, St. Louis County, and Mecklenburg County, and they had basically this same conversation, which is why does the way we define community safety and measure community safety matter? And trying to get everyone to arrive at a definition. And what they discovered, and I've got it in my notes here, is that there are, my apologies, my notes are a little scattered. What they came up with was a framework, and the framework is 5 domains of community safety that has personal safety and security, thriving and socially connected communities, resources for a socially and economically just community, responsive government and public safety agencies, and systems for preventing and addressing harm. So it gets even broader, which is what was included there. What they also discovered was the things that impacted how a community felt about safety were that media coverage was very influential in how individuals perceived safety, that there was incredibly disparate viewpoints about how to measure it. The measurements came to be the most challenging thing, and that even though everyone was supportive, again, of the idea of community safety, but in terms of how you see if it's being successful or not, wildly different from one community to the next, and even within each community, very difficult to measure. It was important that it's a multifaceted concept that reflects the diversity of the community, and that domain of 5 regions was the best that they could come up with to map this. But they couldn't even come to a definition after using much better research techniques than we used here locally. So in terms of next steps, I would be looking for, I suppose, informal direction from the committee that I'd like to pass on to the advisory board, because they want to do what you need, right? We need to get some of our other projects moving and get back into those things and really work on trying to figure out what it is that we meant here when we say improve and maintain community safety. So I would be looking for any suggestions from this board as to perhaps what an alternate goal could be that would achieve that same intent, or if there's just another suggestion about how we can move forward, or just any clear direction I can provide to the advisory board.
Appreciate that. Thank you. You know, I know some of us wrestled with that term community safety, I think, when when it was first introduced. And I'm still not sure, just given now the feedback and hearing how other jurisdictions are wrestling or have wrestled with the same, that it's achievable. And I'd also, just hearing you, don't want the advisory board to get bogged down necessarily in, chasing windmills here, something that just may be elusive and unattainable. So I would wonder about perhaps the ability to refocus or reprioritize kind of our goal setting with the things that we know we need to accomplish. But those are just, the immediate thoughts I have. I'll maybe open it up and see if others have comments relative to this, because I think just where we're at as a system, you don't want to spin your wheels on something that, again, is not going to help us maybe move the needle forward. So, comments, questions? Laura's looking for some guidance. Member Warren, you still thank you from before. Member Lutz.
I think that is, I appreciate those comments, Chair, because I think that is the struggle. You look at just the diversity of departments and programs we have here at this table, and it reflects, everybody brings their lens. I think of it as, health and wellness if I'm thinking of safety, but I think everybody would probably bring in a little different view based on the lens of your everyday work. I wonder if we do stick with safety, if there's an opportunity of, having some type of a defining, document or vision or values that kind of encapsulate what that means to help people, recognizing that I think, and we struggle with this, just the advisory bodies that you talked about there within just DHS. I know this is a challenge that we struggle with all the time. So I do worry that there's probably not a clear answer to this, and instead just how do we define it and make sure that it's representative of the different viewpoints of the groups here.
My mic, Member Triplett.
I'm hesitant to want to pump the brakes on giving up on a term that, seems to be too amorphous based on a survey of only 37 people, half of which were just affected. I mean, the larger community, if you look at Sacramento as a whole, is not, you're not looking at a population that's, half of the population is just as affected. I would like to see a bigger survey because I don't think it's that complex of a phrase to have people come up with what a good definition of that is. But I think maybe focusing on too small of a group is impacting our decision on how we go forward. I would like to see a bigger survey. And you might be able, from a bigger survey that's sent out to a broad spectrum of people in this county, you might be able to pull some themes out that are workable for us, rather than a very small group of people that, a large percentage were just impacted, which, is not representative of the community as a whole.
Laura, can you remind us, what was the delivery method for this survey? I don't remember the mechanics.
Yeah, it was basically, it was a website, and we had QR codes, and there were an email link that was also distributed.
And how were people advised of this?
Through the advisory board. So all of those different bodies, and then those who they knew and the community networks they're connected to. So one thing, as we go into this discussion, when we look at what the AB 109 plan is designed to do, and that it does have a corrections orientation or the community corrections partnership, I think that's one of the challenges that we have, is when we think of safety and we think of the social safety net elements of it, we think of some of the community wellness pieces of it, when we think of the parks and the accessibility, are those things that would be appropriate to fund using this funding source? That's the question I would look to this board to do. Because if we want to embrace the term community safety and perhaps what it includes beyond just the world associated with the direct justice system, then that would need to be a consideration for this body as you move forward into whether the programs that we are supporting and funding and the intention behind why that funding exists, does that align with serving some of those greater goals?
That's helpful. Thank you. And you may have said it in your opening comments, but I am almost revisiting my own thoughts now, hearing the mechanisms and the delivery method based on, I think, some of the interest from Member Triplett. Member Warren, are you next in the queue, or is this just you repeating somehow in the electronic metaverse here?
Thoughts about this.
All right, we'll turn to you then.
I'd just like to say that with a term as abstract as community safety, I think we have other abstract concepts that we as a society accept, like liberty and justice for all. If we really dissected that, those two concepts we might find small variations in what it means. But I think to put our finger on what community safety is as a definition would be really hard. To say what it's not would be much clearer, and I think that picture is far easier for us. So I would encourage us not to get bogged down in the weeds of trying to define that word when it has a wider, more colloquially accepted definition in society. So we may be trying to, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm afraid we're trying to solve a problem that's really not a problem.
Thank you for that. Member Qatari.
Thank you, Chair. I really enjoy the discussion here today because I can see multiple viewpoints for this. For me, I was thinking about, based on the feedback, if we were able to pinpoint a definition, which I agree I think would be really difficult to do, what would we use that for? How would we use it? And I think to your point, Laura, is it's not really the charge of this body, at least, to know what that is. There may be other bodies that might be interested in that and figuring out sort of what the community wants and needs when it comes to community safety. But I agree with the recommendation not to pursue that because I do think it could take a lot of time and resources. I do wonder if there was any data in the study that you shared about the sample size that they surveyed, or if you could share that link with us, because I think there might be some value in a framework like that that does encompass, to Tim's point, the multiple viewpoints of this body and how we think we can achieve safety. But I agree with some earlier comments about let's focus on what we can measure in terms of our deliverables, and this seems interesting, but not like it should be our focus right now from my perspective.
I'd be happy to share that study with the members. I don't have the full packet in front of me. It's 150 pages, so I only printed the first couple. Thanks.
Appreciate both of those comments. In terms of the other studies, has that information also been shared with the advisory board?
Not yet. It will be at the next our upcoming meeting, and we'll go into that in more detail with that project involved.
That might help inform, I think, direction as well. Let me pause. Any other comments? Member Jones.
Thanks. I just want to echo that I agree with the recommendation, which I think is giving some sort of direction to the CCPAB.
Like, if you've got it, please tell us all, because I'm not sure. But no, go ahead.
I thought Laura had a good summary of it sort of in the beginning, which is, careful on how we frame. We're not abandoning this project. It's just explaining here's what we would like you to focus on, which are the more measurable and the focus of what the CCP is for.
Thank you. Yeah. I think when we I think we can still use the term community safety, but we say that in our framing of why we're developing the AB 109 plan, is that that community safety is important, and that perhaps we can even acknowledge that that understanding of what that is, it is mixed and divided, or that there may be the possibility of division in looking at that definition. So what I would suggest is that we put it in our framing language, but remove it from one of our specific goals, and that we create a goal that is more directly acknowledging the justice system and perhaps what safety is looking to do in that context, whether it's looking at risk levels, whether it's looking at other protective measures that are in place under the AB 109 plan. I would encourage us to look at those things to develop a goal that is more specific, without losing safety in the conversation. But we're moving it as one of the main 3 goals of the plan.
Member Benson.
Yes, thank you.
Your mic.
I like how you frame that. I agree with that community safety, acknowledging that we all may have different ideas of exactly what that means, and focusing on the things that we do agree with, which is we do want to lower recidivism. We do want people to get the services they need. We do want people to not stay in jail longer than necessary. And so if you're focusing on the things that we can agree on as measurables, I think that will be more productive, and acknowledging that community safety may have a different meaning for different people. But I do think most people want to address the underlying reasons of criminal behavior, and addressing those is going to make all of us more safe. And so by focusing on that, I think we'll accomplish more.
Other comments? So I'm not sure in terms of the ask where we're at, but it sounds like we're leaning towards revisiting the goals, maybe less emphasis on the definition, but I don't want to misstate or misrepresent anything that was shared. So
If I may make a clarifying
Sure.
recommendation here.
By all means.
So we have 2 paths. One, expand survey, don't expand survey, and regroup. And so that's what I would be looking for is hopefully take a motion one way or the other, whether we should expand the survey or not fully abandon, but move on to other priorities and reframing. So if anyone has one of those suggestions, I suppose I should just make one recommendation my recommendation is that we would not expand the survey, and that we would direct the advisory board to move on in redefining the goal.
So I'll pause. Other comments based on that summary? I will entertain a motion if someone so chooses.
I'll move the recommendation of staff.
And I'll second it.
Okay, got a first and a second.
And just for the record, we have no public comment.
No problem. I'm just coming to that. Thank you. Any other comments before we vote? All right. Please vote.
And the motion carries with those members present.
Great. Thank you. All right, moving to item 5, I believe it is. Clerk, would you please read item 5 into the record for us?
Item 5 is discussion of AB 109 Plan 2024 update preparation.
Great. And Laura, would you please provide the update?
Thank you. So the CCPAB is going to have is getting ready to draft the updated or AB 109 Plan 2024 document. The next time I see you, I will have that draft to present to you in August. And we will be also opening a public comment period at that time to receive that input. But before we go ahead and bring anything to you, I'd like to at least give you an opportunity, and perhaps it's continuing a little bit on the conversation we just had, to provide any input, anything you'd like to see changes to the AB 109 plan, if there are services or eligible programs that weren't deemed eligible last year or weren't specifically identified, if you'd like to bring any of that forward for the CCPAB's consideration, any gentle criticisms of the plan that you have, and ways that we can make it better, make it it clearer and make it more helpful to our. Really, it's designed for those departments who receive this and then develop their budget requests and review those, and for the board as they receive this as well. So this is open forum for any feedback that you have, so that we can design any updates to this plan with you in mind.
Great, thank you. I'll open it up for members and comments or questions. Seeing none at this time. Clerk, any public comment relative to the item?
We have no public comments.
Great. Laura, would you remind us, just in terms of the timeline as it relates to the plan before we move on?
Yes. So the next time I see you will be August, and we will have the draft of the plan. It will go to a public open comment period. We will receive those comments and that feedback, and then on October, we will bring you the final plan for your approval, with noting any changes that have been made based on comments received. If you are interested, and please work through, if you have representatives at the CCPAB, that anything that is important to your agencies is reflected in the draft that we're bringing forward. A couple of years ago, we worked, there was a big kind of overhaul of the structure of the plan and having to do these every year. I think we're approaching the point where our changes are becoming a little more incremental, where we're refining and we're improving. So we are always open to those suggestions. But to finish your timeline, so August draft, October approval, November it goes to the board, and then in December we submit to the BSCC and meet our annual requirements. So that's our timeline, and this plan will guide the budget decisions for the 25-26 year.
Great, thank you for that. If there are no other comments, and there's no public comment, we can move on from the item. This is not seeking any action, correct?
Correct.
All right. Clerk, would you please read item 6 into the record?
Item number 6 is public comment on non-agenda items, and we do not have any public comments.
No public comment. Any other comments from our members? I see no one in the queue. With that in mind, I'd like to adjourn today in honor of former Deputy District Attorney Chris Carlson. I think many of you have known or have heard of his passing. He was certainly a friend to probation. I know when I first came to the department, now just over 10 years ago, Chris was one of the first people that I actually met in the county. He was larger than life, certainly a friend to probation, many of the probation officers specifically. And the thing I remember, and the reason why I bring him up today, is he was also, I think, known as perhaps one of the subject matter experts relative to realignment. So he understood split sentencing and all the changing laws, I think, before any of us really kind of delved into it. And with that expertise, he helped informed a lot of decisions around, our services and supports for our clients, if you will. And so I had the luxury also, after arriving in the county, to travel with Chris, if you can imagine what that was like. So got to know him and really appreciated his insights. So today, just want to make sure we all remember him and appreciate the contributions he's made to our system. With that, we are done. Thank you. Thank you.